Stop and imagine this moment. You're sitting in an auditorium with 200 other people. Napoleon Hill, age 75, is giving a lecture on success principles. He's taught these principles for 50 years, written best-selling books, influenced millions. You're expecting another motivational talk about definiteness of purpose, faith, persistence. Then Hill stops mid-sentence. He's been talking for about 20 minutes, and he goes completely silent, just stands there, staring at the audience. 30 seconds of silence. People start shifting uncomfortably. Is he okay? Did he forget what he was saying? Then Hill speaks, but not what anyone expected. He says, "I need to stop this lecture because I'm about to teach you something I've taught for 30 years, and I recently realized it's wrong, completely wrong. And if I keep teaching it without correcting it first, I'm doing more harm than good." The room went dead silent. What could Napoleon Hill, after 50 years of teaching success, possibly admit was completely wrong? If you stay with me for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you exactly what Hill said in that room in 1958. What principle he'd taught for 30 years, why he finally realized it was wrong, and what he taught instead that changed everything for the students who heard it. This moment, witnessed by 200 people but rarely discussed, reveals more about Hill's character and his actual understanding of success than anything he published. Before we go deeper, comment right now, truth over reputation. Because what Hill did that day required more courage than writing Think and Grow Rich. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and let's discover the only time Napoleon Hill admitted he was completely wrong. Here's what led to that moment. The lecture was at a business conference in Chicago, November 1958. Hill was 75 years old, still sharp, still teaching, still respected. He'd been invited to give his standard talk on success principles. The audience was mostly business owners and entrepreneurs, people who'd read his books, people who expected to hear the familiar principles packaged in an inspiring way. Hill started normally, talking about definiteness of purpose, the importance of having a clear, specific goal, writing it down, reading it daily, visualizing it. This was core Hill teaching. He'd said this thousands of times over 50 years. But this time, as Hill was explaining it, something stopped him. Later, he told a close student that mid-sentence, he realized he was teaching something he no longer fully believed. Not because the principle was entirely wrong, but because the way he'd been teaching it for 30 years created a dangerous misunderstanding. So Hill stopped. And after that long, uncomfortable silence, he said this: "For 30 years, I've taught you that success requires having a definite, major purpose. One clear, specific, dominant goal that you pursue with all your energy until you achieve it. I taught that you should choose this goal in your 20s or 30s, write it down, and commit to it for life. Never waver, never change, never let anything distract you from this one purpose. I taught this because I believed it, and I believed it because the successful people I studied seemed to have this unwavering commitment to one goal. But I was wrong, not about having purpose, but about the rigidity I taught, and I need to correct this before I do more damage." The audience was stunned. Napoleon Hill admitting he was wrong? About a core principle? Hill continued, "Here's what I got wrong. I taught definiteness of purpose as if your purpose should be permanent. Choose it once, commit forever. But life doesn't work that way. You change. Circumstances change. What matters to you at 25 is different from what matters at 45 or 65. If you lock yourself into a purpose you chose at 25 and refuse to ever question or adjust it, you can end up pursuing something that no longer aligns with who you've become. And that creates a specific kind of misery. The misery of achieving a goal that doesn't matter anymore." Hill gave a personal example. "When I was 25, my definite major purpose was to become financially wealthy and recognized as a success authority. That purpose drove me for decades. I pursued it with everything I had, and I achieved it. But by the time I achieved it, I realized it wasn't what I actually wanted most. What I wanted most was to help people live with purpose and meaning, not just get rich. That's related but different. I spent years achieving the wrong goal because I'd committed to it rigidly and never allowed myself to question whether it still fit who I was becoming. That was my mistake, and I taught that mistake to millions of you. The room was completely silent. People were processing. This wasn't a small admission. This was Hill saying a core teaching of Think and Grow Rich needed correction. Hill kept going. So here's what I should have taught. Here's what I'm teaching you now, even though it contradicts 30 years of my previous teaching. You should have a definite purpose, but not a permanent purpose, a current purpose, a purpose that fits who you are right now at this stage of your life with your current values and understanding. And you should be willing to evolve that purpose as you evolve. Not constantly, not frivolously, but honestly. Hill gave specific guidance. Every few years, you should revisit your definite major purpose and ask yourself 3 questions. First, do I still want this? Not have I committed to it, or would quitting be failure, but do I actually still want this, knowing who I am now? Second, does achieving this purpose align with my deepest values today? Not the values I had when I chose this purpose, my values today. Third, if I achieve this purpose, will I look back with satisfaction or regret? If the answer to any of these questions reveals misalignment, you have permission to change your purpose. That's not failure, that's wisdom, that's growth, that's honesty. Then Hill said something that shocked the room even more. I've met people who achieved their definite major purpose exactly as I taught them. They committed at 25. They never wavered. They worked for 30 years. They achieved it, and they were miserable. Because they'd achieved a goal their 25-year-old self wanted, but their 55-year-old self didn't, and they felt trapped by their own success. They'd given everything to achieve something that no longer mattered, and they blamed themselves for not being grateful. But the problem wasn't ingratitude. The problem was they'd followed my teaching too rigidly. They treated purpose as permanent when it should have been evolving. Hill continued, the successful people I studied who seemed to have unwavering commitment to one purpose, I misunderstood them. I thought they never changed their purpose. But when I went back and looked more carefully, most of them did change their purpose. Carnegie's purpose shifted from building wealth to strategic philanthropy. Edison's purpose shifted from proving he could invent to solving specific problems that mattered. Ford's purpose shifted from building cars to transforming manufacturing. They all evolved their purpose as they evolved. But I didn't see that clearly when I was younger. I saw the commitment and missed the evolution. And I taught commitment without evolution. That was my error. Then Hill gave the corrected principle. Here's what I should have taught all along. Have a definite purpose that fits who you are today. Pursue it with total commitment, but hold it with loose fingers. Be willing to evolve it as you evolve. The commitment isn't to a specific goal. The commitment is to living purposefully, whatever that purpose happens to be at different stages of your life. Some people will have the same purpose their entire lives. That's beautiful if it's authentic. But most people will evolve their purpose several times. And that's equally beautiful if it's honest. The mistake is rigidity. Committing to a purpose, then refusing to ever question whether it still fits because you think changing it means you failed. That rigidity creates the misery of achieving goals that don't matter. Hill gave practical guidance. If you're 30 and you choose a definite major purpose, commit to it fully. But at 35, revisit it honestly. At 40, revisit it again. Not to abandon it casually, but to make sure it still aligns with who you're becoming. If it does, great. Deepen your commitment. If it doesn't, have the courage to evolve it. You're not starting over. You're adjusting course based on new information about yourself. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. And I should have taught this 30 years ago. The room was still silent. People were realizing the implications. How many of them were pursuing purposes they'd committed to years ago, but no longer truly wanted? How many were trapped by Hill's teaching about never wavering? Hill addressed this directly. Some of you right now are realizing you're chasing a goal you don't actually want anymore. You committed to it years ago. You've invested everything, and you're terrified to admit it doesn't fit anymore because that feels like failure. Let me tell you clearly, admitting your purpose has evolved is not failure. Continuing to pursue a misaligned purpose just to avoid admitting you've changed is failure. The courageous thing, the wise thing, is to acknowledge the misalignment and adjust. Yes, you might lose time and resources invested in the old purpose, but you'll gain alignment. And alignment with your authentic self is worth more than achieving any misaligned goal. Then Hill made a confession. I'm 75 years old. If I'm honest, my definite major purpose has evolved at least 4 times in my life. From wanting personal wealth in my 20s and 30s, to wanting to complete Carnegie's assignment in my 40s and 50s, to wanting to help people find meaning and purpose in my 60s and 70s. Each evolution required me to let go of something I'd committed to. Each felt like potential failure at the time, but each was actually growth. And I'm grateful I allowed myself to evolve instead of rigidly holding to purposes that no longer fit. I just wish I'd taught you this flexibility from the beginning instead of teaching rigid commitment that I later had to violate myself to stay authentic. The lecture continued for another 30 minutes, but that admission, that correction of 30 years of teaching, was what people remembered. After the lecture, dozens of students approached Hill. Some thanked him for the courage to admit error. Others asked detailed questions about how to know when purpose should evolve versus when you're just facing temporary doubt. Hill answered every question patiently, and he told several people the same thing. The difference between evolution and quitting is honesty. If you're quitting because it's hard, that's quitting. If you're evolving because you've genuinely changed and the old purpose no longer aligns with your authentic self, that's wisdom. Only you know which is true, but you have to be brutally honest with yourself. The Stoics would have recognized Hill's admission immediately. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." But he also wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you. Love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." The second quote shows evolution. Fate changes what it binds you to. You accept the new binding. Hill was teaching the same thing. Your purpose should evolve as your life evolves. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." But he also taught that wisdom means knowing when to persist and when to change course. Both are reactions. Both matter. The wise person knows which applies when. Seneca wrote extensively about how his own purposes evolved throughout his life. From pursuing political power in his youth, to pursuing philosophy in middle age, to pursuing peace in his final years. He didn't see this as inconsistency, he saw it as growth. Now here's what Hill's admission means for you. If you're pursuing a definite major purpose you committed to years ago, ask yourself honestly, do I still want this? Does this still align with who I am now? If I achieve this, will I be satisfied? If the answer to any of those is no, you have permission to evolve your purpose. Not abandon purpose entirely, evolve it to fit who you've become. That's not failure, that's honesty, that's courage. That's what Hill finally taught in 1958 after 30 years of teaching the opposite. And here's why Hill's admission matters beyond just the principle about purpose. It shows what real integrity looks like. Hill could have kept teaching the rigid version of definiteness of purpose. It was working, people loved it, it sold books, it made him respected. But Hill valued truth more than consistency. When he realized he'd been teaching something that created problems, he admitted it publicly, in front of 200 people, at age 75, after 50 years of teaching. That's character. Most teachers, when they realize they taught something wrong, quietly adjust future teaching without admitting past error. Hill did the opposite. He stopped mid-lecture and said, "I was wrong for 30 years, and I need to correct it now." That admission cost him nothing externally, but it gave students permission to question their own commitments honestly, to evolve their purposes without feeling like failures, to value alignment over achievement. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote in his private journal about mistakes he'd made and lessons he was still learning in his 60s. He didn't pretend to have everything figured out. He admitted ongoing growth. Hill did the same in that 1958 lecture, and the students who heard it were given a gift. The gift of knowing that evolution is allowed, that purposes can change, that alignment matters more than rigid commitment to goals that no longer fit. So here's what you should do. Take your current definite major purpose and honestly evaluate it against 3 questions. Do I still genuinely want this? Does achieving this align with my deepest values today? If I achieve this, will I look back with satisfaction? If all 3 answers are yes, deepen your commitment. If any answer is no, you have permission to evolve your purpose. Not abandon it carelessly, evolve it honestly. You're not starting over, you're adjusting course. And that adjustment might be the most important decision you make, because achieving a misaligned goal creates the specific misery of success that doesn't satisfy. But evolving toward an aligned goal creates the possibility of achievement that actually matters. Comment "truth over reputation" like this video so others learn that purposes should evolve as we evolve. Subscribe because we're teaching what Hill finally admitted after 30 years, and share with someone pursuing a goal they committed to years ago but no longer truly wants. Napoleon Hill at 75 admitted he taught definiteness of purpose too rigidly for 30 years. Purposes should be current, not permanent. Commitment with flexibility. That's the corrected principle. Have the courage to evolve yours. Let's go.